Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it. If you're new here, my name is Isabel, and on this channel I share my journey to becoming a full-time artist. I am a self-taught artist and I specialize in drawings in graphite. And so this week I thought I would share 5 tips on how to get started with graphite, teaching you what I've learned along the way. And if you are a true beginner and would like to get started with graphite, then this video is for you. So first, let's talk about pencils and pencil grades. So pencils are made from a mix of graphite and clay. The more clay is in the mix, the harder the lead, and that produces light marks. And the more graphite is in the mix, then the softer the lead, and that produces darker marks. So graphite pencils come in a variety of grades from hard to soft, and each has a different tone and use. So I'm going to give you a quick breakdown on what it is. So graphite pencil grades range from a 9H to a 9B, 9H being the hardest lead, so producing light tones, and 9B being a softer lead producing darker tones. There are some softer pencils. I know Faber-Castell does produce up to a 14B in their pit graphite matte pencils, but 9H to 9B is kind of the traditional range for grades. H pencils have a hard lead, and so they're used to produce the lightest tones in your drawings. The higher the number, the harder the lead is, so the lightest the tone will be. So then you have the HB pencil or the F pencils, which are mid-tones pencils. You're probably really familiar with the HB pencil. That's very used in common writing. But yeah, as in a drawing with graphite, you would use the HB, the F. I also use the B as a sort of a mid-tone. And then you have the B pencil, so from B to B9, and those would be used for darker values in your drawing since it's a softer lead with more graphite. In my work, I don't use the full range of all the pencils from 9H to 9B. I most often I start at 4H. I think it's light enough. When I start a sketch, I'll start in 4H or 2H. So I'll use 4H, 2H for my lightest values. Then I'll jump into H, HB, and B for kind of my mid-tones, and I'll use a 5B or 8B for darker values. And actually for the darkest values, I'll sometimes even add a little bit of black colored pencils, or the pit graphite. This goes up to 14B, and that's for the darkest values in my drawings. So in order to produce a smooth shading, and I'll show you my technique next, you need some very sharp pencils. So there's a couple ways you can sharpen your pencils. You could use a pencil sharpener. I particularly like this one from Blackwing because it sharpens your pencil first and then it sharpens the lead, and it does result in a very sharp pencil. Or you could use a blade followed by some sandpaper. So let me show you how. Using a sharp blade, carefully remove the wood by turning the pencil and exposing the lead a little bit at a time. Now take your piece of fine sandpaper and hold the lead flat on the sandpaper and rotate the pencil as you're sanding so that it creates this really fine point. So let's talk about shading. So my shading technique is actually very simple, but it takes a lot of patience. So let's draw a leaf. It's like a normal leaf. I don't know if you can see that I'm using a 4H. But for the shading, I'm going to use a H pencil so you can see it on the screen. This is a mid-tone. And really all you do, so you want to hold your pencil not too close to the lead and not too far away either, kind of right here. And what you do is tiny, tiny circles next to each other. and you just keep going. So that's why that takes a long time, because you're not doing really long strokes that would make it kind of streaky. If you do little circles next to each other, it's gonna create a pretty smooth shading. So I'm keeping the pressure of my pencil very light. I'm not pressing on the paper much at all. Maybe I did a little bit more here. If you want to add a bit more value, you can go over what you've already shaded, and all you're doing, and continue with the little circles, and all you're doing is covering more of the white of the paper, and that gives you a darker value. So that's why I don't use the full range of the pencils, because I could use one pencil and create sort of like a gradient and like create smooth transitions with the same pencil by working in layers. And then you can add, yeah, more value. And that way you have a gradient that's pretty seamless. So that's kind of the basic technique for shading. It's really just that. Like I said, I don't use the full range of the pencils, but that's because I work in layers, kind of as you would work in colored pencils. And I feel that's how you get the best transitions. And yeah, it requires a lot of time, but if you get in the flow, listen to a podcast or music or something, it also can be very relaxing. So let's talk about erasers. So there's different type of erasers you can use in your work with graphite. You have dust-free erasers, kneaded erasers, precision erasers, or even a electric eraser. So the dust-free eraser I mainly use for when I'm sketching. I don't really use it on final work. The kneaded eraser, the great thing is about those is you can shape them any way you'd like. So if you want to add a little highlight, a tiny highlight on a drawing, you can just do that. Hope you can see that. The precision erasers come in different tips, a square tip or a round tip. This is a Mono Zero by Tombow, which I really love. I especially like the round tip actually. So say if I wanted to create a vein in this leaf, I could just use the eraser and it creates a subtle, but you can use it. I mainly use erasers for highlights. Now, if you know where your highlights are going to be, which most likely you would before you start drawing, you would save that area of the paper, especially if you want a really bright highlight. Now, if you have a darker area in your drawing, you might want to use a electric eraser. Because those work really well. So if you had a lot of layers of graphite, the electric eraser will work the best. Now the problem is, as you can see, sometimes it leaves a little residue, so I use feathers to get that stuff off my paper, because the feather is light enough that it's not going to smudge the drawing itself. You don't want to use your fingers, because your fingers have oils and also heat, and it would just smudge the paper. So using a feather, I find these in nature, but you could use like a little duster, something really light. You could use a brush, a paint brush, and just go very lightly over the drawing to get off any eraser residue you might have. And yeah, so those are all the types of erasers you can use. Honestly, the one I use the most is this Mono Zero by Tombow and a kneaded eraser. Another tip I wanted to mention when you start with graphite is what paper to use. So you want a paper that has a smooth surface. You could use this drawing paper by Strathmore, or I'm sure there's other brands with similar products. This is made for dry medium pencils or colored pencils. And the paper isn't like super thick, but thick enough that even if you do a lot of layers and some erasing, it will hold the graphite. If you want to invest a little bit more money, maybe when you're more advanced, I personally like to use this Arches hot press watercolor paper. The paper is thicker than this drawing paper, and it holds the graphite really, really well. I guess my last little tip would be to make sure you keep your work clean, and to do that I use tissue paper to put under my hand so that I don't smudge the drawing I'm working on with my hand, and the oils on my hand don't go into the graphite and smudge everything. And also in between sessions, so you're working on a larger drawing, like this one took me 4 sessions to complete, I like to in between cover it with, again, tissue paper so that it stays clean. There's nothing that's gonna end up on the paper, on the drawing. And yeah, so I wanted to end this video with a little demo. It's apple season, it's September, so I figured maybe draw an apple would be fun. So I started a sketch using my 4H pencil. My apple doesn't have a leaf, but I decided to add it anyway. I sort of marked this area to leave blank because it's gonna be a bright highlight. We're gonna imagine that the apple is being lit from this angle. My lights here are not specifically focused on that angle for the apple because I have another light so that my workspace is lit properly. So this is kind of a reference without being a real reference. I do a lot of art from reference photos I find on Pinterest, so I rarely draw from live flowers or any, objects or anything. So what I'm going to do first is use my 2H pencil and start shading in sort of as like a base layer. This is going to be sort of my base layer / the lightest tones in the apple. So now that I'm done with kind of my initial layer, I'm going to use a pencil H and start to add some contrast. And then that will also help refine my shading. I kind of went through it a little bit too fast. And that's the thing when you're working in graphite. If you feel that you're getting really impatient, which happens to me all the time, it's best to walk away and then take a break, come back later. Yeah, because if you rush through it, then it doesn't look as smooth at all. So now that my apple is starting to take shape, I'm going to use my pencil B and 5B and maybe finish off with a little bit of 8B to add more contrast where needed. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you watched it till the end. I do appreciate that. If you liked this tutorial, if you found it helpful, let me know in the comments. Please give the video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you next week in a new vlog. Bye!